to a new episode of The Smartest Moron, where today we're taking a look at Shadow Hearts. A review I technically should have finished over a year ago. Did I mention I'm not a fan of college?
If you haven't played Koudelka, which was set before Shadow Hearts, don't worry. It's not too necessary to play that game in order to understand Shadow Hearts, but some backstory never hurts for the minor characters. Anyway, Shadow Hearts was released in 2001 on the PlayStation 2, developed by Saknoth, which at this point would be controlled by Aruz Entertainment, and published by Midway, which went defunct in 2009. So there's a pretty damn good chance we will never see Shadow Hearts ever again. According to what I could find on the development, the art director of Koudelka, Matsuzo Itakura, succeeded Hiroki Kikuta as the president of Saknoth, and was the one to come up with Shadow Hearts. And to help give a little push to the game, the development team were ex-members of Squaresoft. Unfortunately for them, Shadow Hearts struggled to gain attention. Why, you ask? Yeah, that didn't help things. Final Fantasy X had come out and the expectations of RPGs rose. Not to mention that going with a well-known IP is a lot easier than risking all your cash on, say, something new like Shadow Hearts. And not helping was the sharp criticism regarding the environments of Shadow Hearts either. Reviews were certainly mixed, but there is apparently a cult following regarding the game. It was at least popular enough to earn 2 more games before the series died due to company problems I'll mention when we get to Shadow Hearts Covenant.
But for now, I got a game to cover, so let's just dive into Shadow Hearts.
Shadow Hearts is your standard menu-based RPG with random battles, the occasional puzzle solving, etc., deviating from the mechanics of Koudelka. Due to the time it was released, it relied on a lot of the same gimmicks old RPGs of the PS1 era relied on, like pre-rendered backgrounds with the occasional thing moving. These environments certainly aren't bad, and each dungeon doesn't overstay their welcome. Well, except for the goddamn maze, but I'll come back to that later. Also, Yuri's run cycle looks really damn silly. This is how he's running!
This is how he's running, people.
Shadow Hearts does bring some new things to the genre, such as the Judgment Ring. This thing will make sure you pay attention to every single combat situation, because it is the difference between life and death in this game. Each time you use the attack or magic command, you see color areas as a red line spins around. The idea is to hit these, and missing just one can actually cause the reticle to stop. For normal attacks, this isn't as bad, as the areas you hit still count as one hit each. For spells, however, you need to hit everything, and missing them all can cause the spell not to be cast, leaving your character wide open and a turn wasted. And it does take some time to adjust to the speed to not miss these things. To further increase greed in the player, there are special red areas that, when hit, actually up the damage slightly. Early on this is barely noticeable and not really worth the effort, especially when you aren't used to how fast the ring spins. Later on though, it's definitely more helpful when you want to finish off a monster much faster. The funny thing is, the ring goes for items as well, meaning hitting the red areas on items can restore more HP or MP. Needless to say, this isn't a game you can just press one button and win, especially when there is one more factor to consider: the sanity meter. When fighting, your sanity points drop by 1 each time and can decrease even more depending on whether or not an enemy uses a move specifically to damage your SP, or if you try and make Yuri fuse into his demonic forms. Once all the SP is gone, the character will go berserk and attack enemies and allies alike, as well as not receiving any experience points. Fortunately, it does restore by the time a battle is over, so there's no need to worry about it outside of a fight. In battle though, it's kinda like a race against the clock. My absolute favorite thing about this meter is how it kinda really fits in a game with such a dark tone, as well as all the powerful attacks in the game. It really shows how even the heroes have their limitations when fighting, especially when one can transform into demons. It highlights how you must maintain control, and not doing so hinders your growth. There's even a little minigame called the Lottery where you can find tickets through the game, and by finding certain members, you can gain some incredibly powerful items. Or you can gain tissues if you lose, like I did. Probably to wipe those tears after you keep reloading your save just to get that one stupid item.
Although, trust me, you're gonna need these tissues later. God, you're gonna need them later.
However, the puzzles also require the Judgment Ring, and this is where the ring becomes even more annoying. Now, in a fight, this can be fixed by, say, having a slowdown item or something. But some puzzles sometimes require an insane amount of button pressing or timing. The one I am showing now, involving sneaking into a kid's hideout, took me so long because my thumb couldn't keep up. Then there's the Graveyard, which is a mechanic that I admit annoyed me a lot. It fills up for every enemy defeated by Yuri, the energy being Malice. It goes up various levels, but when it reaches red, a being known as the Grim Reaper comes out, aka Foxface, who looks very much like Yuri's own father. You can technically beat him, but good luck with that. Early on he is impossible, especially when only Yuri can go toe-to-toe against him, and the reward isn't worth it. Speaking of which, when you beat enemies, you can also gain elemental energy, which can then be used by Yuri to learn more fusions in the graveyard to help out in the fight. Still, the graveyard also probably explains why the levels and such are short. Otherwise, if you keep fighting using Yuri, the jewel will be stuck at red level all the damn time, and you constantly have to face box space. I think that would get annoying really damn quickly, wouldn't it? So the short level design actually kinda helps it out and keeps the game from dragging. The only real problem is the linearity of the game. Side quests do not open up until the game is almost over, barring one or two, though there are some bits to explore, so it's not as bad as Final Fantasy XIII's linearity, and plus the story actually being good, that helps out a lot. Much like a lot of RPGs though, it is very easy to break the game. This isn't just with grinding either. The Mind's Eye, for instance, can make any melee fighter broken by doubling their attack power. Sure, it makes the Judgment Ring invisible, but since the spots stay the same, all you have to do is memorize the spots, and boom! Broken game. Even more breaking are the keys. With the right setup, you can easily defeat bosses in a matter of a few turns. Considering that keeps a continuous chain of physical attacks, combine it with the Mind's Eye, and not even bosses will stand a chance. This kinda takes away some of the challenge of the gameplay. At least if you know what you're doing and what to expect out of an enemy. Sometimes they may end up surprising you with some skills, as they do have a wide range of attacks, like targeting your SP or inflicting status effects. And yes, it includes instant death attacks too. The cheapest moves of all. I admit I had to refer to a guide a lot of the time due to maps and needing to finish off side quests. Sadly, the combat music early in the game doesn't really help the mood. I honestly didn't care for the song because it nearly put me to sleep, which doesn't help when combat is mostly leaving Yuri to attack while Alice heals at the beginning of the game. The music only ever picked up during the second half, where things felt a lot faster and the tone darker as a result, feeling a bit more desperate at times. Another problem is that some attacks really lack some kind of impact and punch to them, no matter how vicious they look. But hey, the overall experience got better, though I'm still having problems with Alice's attack animation as she hits enemies with her book.
I'll harm you, or ban you very much with DMC Chronicles of Vert. Why do I own this?
It's you.
Yes, Roger Bacon. I'm honored that you remember me.
The game takes place prior to World War I. On board a train, one of the protagonists, Alice, is being guarded by several soldiers, while a dapper-looking fellow appears to be the enemy. Well, he doesn't look too threatening. But just as this violent gentleman manages to get a hold of Alice, another young man by the name Yuri intervenes, and gets his ass handed to him. Badly. Even when transformed into a demon and using everything he has, the stranger manages to keep gaining an upper hand. Well, until he drops his guard, and Yuri demonstrates his manliness with a punch.
I am a man!
Eventually, when Yuri and Alice escape, it's clear there's a bit of indifference between them, not helping with Yuri's less than noble attitude, and him being a bit of a pervert as well. Also, I think him transforming into a devil will kinda put her on edge. Further not helping things is Yuri being assaulted by another voice that told him to rescue Alice and bring her to another place. We're not even 5 minutes and our protagonist is already psychotic. It's gotta be a record. And after they sleep out in the open, since there's no other place to do it, Yuri is met with his father, who has apparently taken the form of Fox Space, basically a manifestation of the Grim Reaper. Naturally, Yuri gets the crap beaten out of him, again, and gets transported to the graveyard. And it's there that the graveyard mechanic is introduced, as well as the 4 masks that will serve as a plot point later. They tell Yuri, after some insults and threats of course from our hero, that the hatred of the monster he kills will shape into the form of Foxface once again, and eventually claim his soul.
Game, you need to slow the hell down. It's not even an hour yet, and there's so many freaking plot materials, I'm running out of pen ink!
So yeah, as you can tell from the beginning, it crams in a ton of plot elements, and none of it is helped with knowing next to nothing about the characters. The entire beginning of this game didn't really flow well, and the next segment doesn't help in the slightest. To make sure we save time, I'll go over the basic summary of the game. Yuri has to protect Alice from the Dapper Fellow, along with another villain named Dehwai who wants to take over the world, and with his power threatens to destroy it. Not helping is that the Dapper Man may or may not be Roger Bacon from Kodelka. With the aid of various people such as a spy, a vampire, a sorcerer, and a psychic, it's up to Yuri to not only protect Alice, but to save the world. However, given his own curse, he might need some saving as well. Fortunately, the plot does get better with a better pacing to it, and character backstories and development are surprisingly very good, as I'll get into in the spoiler section. It takes him maybe about 3 or 4 hours for the plot to really get going strong, and it's really not that much different from other RPGs, honestly. Not to mention that the side quests offer a lot in terms of character development that are interesting to see. I honestly prefer this when doing side quests, since not only are you getting a more powerful item, but you're actually showing more development for other characters, while giving the main plot enough focus for it to stand on its own. Without the side quests though, the game can be completed around 20 hours, but with it, it can easily last another 10. If all of them are done anyway. The problem comes in that a large majority of important story details can be missed, especially when there are some areas you cannot go back to after a certain point. Also, there are not a lot of voiced cutscenes. In fact, it has a mix of Japanese and English voice actors within combat, while CGI cutscenes are rare as well, though they remain in English. Other cutscenes usually have voiceovers with pictures, which honestly work out well enough for the game since a lot of the story remains good, but the problem is the sound balance. I could really use some subtitles at this point. It feels like I'm watching something on AMC again. The game also has some surprisingly silly moments from certain monster designs, like this one hitting me with what I assume is its dick, or despite this narration of a certain tragic moment in the past, any tension or sadness is ruined by this voice.
But then, another very strange sound joined in. Slip, slip, splat, slip, slip, splat.
Yes, that was meant to be taken seriously. I already watched it several times at this point, so I'm immune to laughing right now. However, a bigger problem for the story is how characters kinda lose meaning in the plot. They aren't useless, except for Keith, who lacks any kind of development whatsoever, but people like Zeus have their arcs end early on. In terms of character development compared to other games or even general usefulness, they will run out and thus stand out less, making them less memorable. It doesn't mean they're bad, just, well, they gotta stand out more. It's for this reason that in the spoiler section, we will only cover Yuri, Alice, and the Dapper Fellow. Besides, I think it'll save us an extra 5 minutes.
Now you made me mad, Pops.
Normally, I point out what is bad with the plot, but aside from the beginning, which crammed in so much material, there was nothing that really screamed god-awful. Every sequence was either fairly good or standard. Well, except for one, the maze level. This basically forces you into parties of 2 into going through challenges that are bullcrap and something you expect would be in a harder mode of the game or something. And it was all because Zusen's master just wanted to screw with you because he was bored. How well did that go for him? Oh yeah, the Power Rangers villain known as Dehwai killed him. Speaking of which, Dehwai himself wasn't really that groundbreaking of a villain. He was fairly standard, but also offered up some comedic relief at some points, like disguising himself as a demonic puppy. Really, the Dapper Man stole the show, but more on him later. For now, let's focus on Yuri and Alice. When I first played the game, Alice was one of the characters I dreaded, since the past few games I have dealt with weak people becoming strong were done so poorly. Yuri was the same, since he was mostly just a perverted and impatient jerk and thought it would be stereotypical change into a really good guy. However, the game surprised me. Alice's timidness is kind of expected given the situation, and the fact that her savior is a perverted devil doesn't really help things. She gradually gets over that when she realizes, oh yeah, he's kind of an idiot that makes plenty of mistakes, but does see how good of a heart he has. He's admittedly helping her for his own selfish reasons, mainly to shut a voice in his head up, but he gradually grows to really care for her as a friend and more. Things got far better when Alice helps Yuri and discovers his past. This was a key moment that won me over to supporting these two. At this point in the game, Yuri has gone crazy from fusing with the Seraphic Radiance during the first half, nobly sacrificing himself to make sure Alice lived, as well as several other people. Yeah, it didn't go well, and he ended up flying off somewhere. At this point, Alice and the gang had to find Yuri and beat him up while he was still crazy, and then Alice went deep into his soul in order to solve some problems. This isn't just because she needs Yuri to help her. In fact, that's hardly if ever mentioned at all. It's because she cares about his well-being, and seeing he deserves a chance at happiness while also taking her chance to protect him as well, going so far as to wager her own soul for such a feat. This has even helped with conversations in the game, particularly in side quests that actually affect the two. Their conversations during some of them are surprisingly cute. This is what I really like to see in a couple of video games. Actual development, them talking to one another. Unlike certain games where nothing changes or there's not really a reason for the player to care. The build-up doesn't feel rushed, and while not terribly unique, it does actually manage to give both characters development, giving Alice even more strength to handle herself and others, while letting Yuri deal with his own inner demons, with Boxface basically serving as Yuri's shadow. Think of it like Persona 4 if that makes things easier. Not the same thing, but close enough. These two help each other develop and grow like a couple should. This is even more apparent as Alice stops being scared and even puts a lot of pressure on herself during the final stages if you got the bad ending, and Yuri with how he shows far more confidence in his transformation abilities during combat. You notice how he keeps grabbing his head, afraid to embrace the madness and letting the power control him, at least early on in the game. and she ends up saving the world during the bad ending. She is dying during the entire trip, but hides it from everyone except Margaret, the only person she confides in. She knows the level of power they are going to face, but she doesn't care about her body. She cares about all of her friends and everyone living on the Earth. Hell, she's gonna die anyway. She wants to use the last of her power to absolutely ensure Yuri can end up living. Thus, it makes the ending all the more heartbreaking. There are two, one where Yuri saves Alice from losing her soul when she made the deal, but the canon ending has her dying instead, and the scene is surprisingly subtle too. No grand tears, no grand sadness, just seeing Yuri's sad face and a tear is enough to just break you. Just take a look.
As the Warlock said in the end, even if another age of storms buffets this world, I intend to go on living and fighting for you who freed me from the darkness, for the one I love.
You could take a tissue now.
Albert Simon, however, the Dapper Man, was certainly fairly decent at being menacing and powerful. However, later on, they try to make him more sympathetic thanks to some dialogue from Roger Bacon. Oh, don't worry, we'll cover him in a bit. Now, I don't exactly mind this explanation. On the contrary, given the time period, the negativity towards dark magic, and him being imprisoned for trying to do good in the world by exposing the crimes of the Vatican, it's understandable. He was a man who believed in equality and was ahead of his time. And when we see he was branded a heretic and imprisoned seeing the worst of humanity, he set out to destroy it, rebuilding it in his own image, though we will see another reason when we get to Shadowheart's Covenant. It is kinda tragic to see that happen, but not so much when it is being told to us. And that's ultimately the problem with the Albert Simon stuff. We are really only told this kind of stuff near the end of the game, and there isn't much evidence to really support him as a tragic figure. On the contrary, he seems jovial, embracing some of the dark powers he wields, sometimes treating things like a game and not really caring who is in his way. There are rare moments of honor shown by him, such as not killing Alice when she went solo for a very dumb reason. And the finale, while I do find weak thanks to the final boss, does have a surprising show of honor from Albert Simon, letting the fate of the world be held in the balance of a fight. After he loses, he surprisingly states how Yuri and his friends may just prove him wrong, and he seems hopeful of that. It's like he desired for someone to stop him all this time. You could argue that explains whenever he has a chance to finish off Yuri's group, he rarely if ever steps into the fray himself, letting his minions take care of things. It's the little things you have to see to try and find that good part of himself that hasn't really, turned completely nuts, since he does seem to get off on hurting people and using people a lot. Nonetheless, despite my complaints, he is a fairly decent villain for the game and knew how to be a legitimate threat to the party. Also, he's not immune to being silly either.
Don't!
Now, there's a question I'm sure everyone is wondering. Does Roger Bacon get even sillier? Look at his pad and you tell me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the team knew that Roger wasn't exactly someone you could take entirely seriously, so they went a bit over the top with him with his appearance and actions. For God's sakes, he developed this teleporting machine that's powered by running on a treadmill. And it works! He has a vending machine that gives out items and weapons. He traded Yuri some kind of artifact for a porn magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached something so stupid and absurd, it's actually kind of awesome. And according to my friends, this is him tame. So yeah, I'm definitely playing the sequel right now. But yeah, Roger Bacon certainly feels more like he's used for comedic effect. At the very least, he does share some story with Albert Simon, but I don't feel the game showed them together enough. Maybe Roger Bacon should have been playable. Now that would have been awesome. But hey, he does manage to contribute a lot to the party, so that's good. Less awesome, however, was God in the game, who I'm convinced isn't God. He's built up as this powerful being, and I could certainly believe it if I didn't use the damn keys to wipe the floor with him. Moreover, it really does feel like one of those bosses simply meant to be the super mega ultra hard boss that comes out of left field like a lot of RPGs do. When I want to fight a final boss, I would much rather fight the main enemy I have been pursuing. Simply having some enemy who was given no conflict at all until the end is pretty weak. Not to mention, it's basically just summoning an alien in a game about demons. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, it worked for Lavos in Chrono Trigger. Yeah, because he was built up for the longest time and was set in the story. Not to mention there was enough info to make Lavos intimidating. Meanwhile, this god thing just comes out of nowhere based on some psycho calling him. Unless you are ill-prepared, I don't feel very intimidated by him. I know I'm asking for logic after getting dick slapped by a demon earlier in the game, but I want some logic anyway!
does Shadow Hearts hold up? Well, despite some complaints, I really had a lot of fun with this.
This game worried the hell out of me when I first started out, and I knew next to nothing. So much information is thrown at you, and yet it was so little because you knew next to nothing about the characters involved, and it all felt rushed. At least in Koudelka, things were made simpler with the mystery of the monastery and how fast the plot moves so you can learn things quickly. But when it did move past the slowness, it became far more interesting to see the characters and things better explained. The main difference with this, compared to say something like Final Fantasy XIII, is that everyone claims that game got better after 20 to 30 hours, whereas in Shadow Hearts, it took about 2 to 3 hours, which is pretty standard for RPGs, especially if you play Shin Megami Tensei games like I do. After that, the pacing was fairly solid and moves quickly, and has several enjoyable characters to boot. There are issues with the level design being incredibly short to compensate for the graveyard mechanic, and the attack animations lack impact, but at the same time, it can still be challenging enough thanks to the various movesets bosses have, as well as the excellent sanity bar in addition to MP and HP. Still, there are multiple ways to break that balance too, and with a guide, the game becomes far easier. And you can tell the ring is an idea still being toyed with and can get a bit getting used to, as well as feel tedious for standard fights. It's only at its worst when dealing with mundane stuff to get further in the story, and it sometimes doesn't ease up. Unlike Dante's Inferno, however, Shadow Hearts manages to take stuff from its competition and manages to make new mechanics that make it different and fun. It's not perfect, but an enjoyable experience nonetheless.
But there's another question that needs answering. Does Shadow Hearts Covenant go even more over the top?
That is one giant pussy.
The answer is a resounding hell yes. I'm the smartest moron, and hopefully you'll be able to join me when I review Shadow Hearts Covenant. And hopefully this time, it won't take a freaking year.
Ah, the good feeling of finally finishing a review. Considering the crappy year 2015 has been, I need to feel accomplished. You can help that feeling by checking out a new quick review on Lost Dimension, a game all about finding those pesky traitors as you save the world. Or you can check out my award-winning show, at least at the Smosh Games Alliance August Challenge, on the new show Saviors of the Tale, featuring the lovely Milia Rage as I analyze her. Thank you so much for your continued patience and support. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you feel I need to make improvements, don't be afraid to post any comments. Trust me, it's one of the only ways I can really improve my stuff. Until next time.